next week with the fertilized chapter. So let's get started with chapter 12. And we're talking about turfgrass management. And to begin with, the book starts off with, a good quote that full service landscape management companies report that 70% of their gross income is from turfgrass maintenance. So think about that. More than half, almost 3/4 of their profit, their gross income, comes from cutting grass. Guys, and don't get me wrong, it pays the bills. It paid my bills for several years. People tend to look down on the grass cutter, but if you look at it in a professional manner and that you're a business owner, it is one of the best ways to make money. Before the economy turned down back in '09, I knew several landscape contractors that would refuse to even cut grass. They would refer it to somebody else because they were bigger and better and beyond cutting grass. But as soon as the economy tanked and those landscape jobs quit cutting in, they had to have maintenance jobs to survive. Bigger landscape companies have to have maintenance for their main source of income. They have to keep the doors open, or if not, these far few in between landscape jobs, especially when the economy turned down, a lot of companies had to shut their doors. So people that used to complain about never, or would bragging about they'd never ever mow grass, are doing it today, and it is a good way to make money. Now, granted, if I was going to be my only employee, if I was not going to hire employees, it was just going to be me, myself, and I, grass mowing would not be my choice of business. I would be more into the fertility apps and actually doing a lawn care operation where I'm putting out fertilizer, I'm spraying for weeds. It'd be a lot easier for me, myself, to handle that type of work versus mowing. You get behind on mowing, rainy days, you're going to be put behind. You can always catch up the lawn care, just like we're catching up lectures this week. But when it comes to grass, it just takes that amount of time to do it. But even look, the full service landscape, which means they're doing pruning, they're doing fertility, they're doing pine straw, they're doing mulch, they're probably doing landscape jobs. These are your full service landscape management companies are reporting that 70% of their income is from cutting grass or turf grass maintenance. Keep calm and mow the lawn. Now, good old North Carolina. We're in the Triad. We're in the heart of North Carolina, and we're part of this transition zone of turf grass. Well, we have cool season grasses and we have warm season grasses. And this transition zone that we are in allows us to either have cool season turf or warm season turf as our in our lawns. But typically in the Triad, we're going to see more cool season lawns. You'll start seeing the warmer seasons towards the coast. But we do have a few clients in our business that have zoysia grass and a few that have Bermuda grass. And I'm sure you guys know Lisa Sorthout, one of your other instructors. She has a zoysia grass in her lawn. Me, I'm the big fescue guy. I love fescue. It helps me generate money. It's easy for me to take care of. I'm just a cool season grass. Maybe it's just because I'm cool. Little joke there. But no. I can make more money off cool season grasses than I can warm season grasses. I'm going to cut them more. I'm going to plug and seed in the fall. I'm going to, they're going to have probably a little more, insects and weed problems. So I'm making more money. I'm still, keeping the door open. But if I was doing fertility apps and I was just doing for warm season clients, I'm not going to be making as much money, and I'm in business to make money. So I'm a cool season type of turf grass guy. Now, let's talk a little bit more about cool seasons. Some examples would be Kentucky bluegrass, tall fescue, which is what I have personally in my lawn, perennial ryegrass. Now, this perennial ryegrass, you can actually use it to overseed your warm season grasses. So if you have a client that has a Bermuda lawn, you can actually overseed it in the winter with perennial or annual ryegrass to give it color through the winter, because all warm season grasses go dormant and they're going to turn brown in the cooler temperatures. We have some fine fescues that are some other turfgrass cool season grasses, and then we have annual ryegrass and bluegrass, rough bluegrass, creeping bent grass. And the neat thing about creeping bent grass, or any bent grass, you're going to see mainly on like a golf course, green, a tee box, or the greens. And this is a cool season grass that you're actually thinking that it's probably a warm season grass if you see it on a golf course. But no, bent grasses are used for tee boxes and golf course holes. And then we have orchard grass. In the textbook, please, pay close attention to the descriptions of each one of these grasses. They can be test questions for you. But tall fescue, mainly, I'm sure you guys have all heard of Kentucky 31. It's what I use in my yard most of the time. Every now and then I'll splurge and get the transition blends that'll have some of the finer fescues and stuff. But I'm okay with Kentucky 31. I can make my Kentucky 31 lawn look really, really well. Another thing about the tall fescue, it's a bunch type. It doesn't spread by the rhizomes and stuff as your warm season grasses does. And you're going to have to overseed it. That's just part of the deal. Just making sure I'm actually looking through the book now to make sure that I tell you guys that of what's important. Books talking about mixing, 90% tall fescue with 10% Kentucky bluegrass. That's good. My grandmother and grandfather actually put out some bluegrass in our front yard. That's still a good, healthy stand of. It takes forever to spread, but they just did it in that one area, probably where they'd had some extra seed left from somewhere else, and they'd put out there. But actually, it's doing really well. It's a dark green color. It's so wonderful to walk barefooted through. So I'm happy that part of that's there. But with these cool season grasses, remember that most of the shoot growth and root growth is going to happen in the spring and in the fall. Hence, cooler temperatures. We have cool season grasses. It's going to get stressed out in the summer, and it's going to get stressed out in the winter. And you're actually going to see some of the browning happen, just the very tips of it, during the winter months. And you'll see some fescue stuff, fescue type grasses die out in the summer too, especially if they don't have irrigation. And when we talk about mowing frequency, you'll realize that we may be able to skip a few mowings in the summer just because the grass isn't actively as growing as it is in the spring and in the fall. And also, sometimes in the spring, you may have to cut your yard a couple times a week or do it for a client instead of doing it every 7 to 10 days or 7 to 14 days, as the book states. You could actually may need to come in during the spring and cut it like every 4 or 5 days just because the grass is so actively growing. All right, now our warm season grasses. And since we're talking about the chart here, take a look at your warm season grasses. They're going to start growing highly in the spring and then kind of fade off in the fall. So their biggest months of shoot growth and root growth is going to be spring through early fall. And then you can see in the winter that the grasses do go dormant and that they turn brown. And some examples of our warm season grasses here is Bermuda grass, zoysia, St. Augustine grass, centipede, buffalo grass, and then we'll see some Baja, carpet, cucuyua, and some seashore paspalum. The ones that we're going to see mainly here in the triad is going to be Bermuda and zoysia. Your St. Augustine, centipede, be more towards the coast, and occasionally you'll see these down at the beach, especially the seashore paspalum, but the two big ones down there would be your St. Augustine and centipede grass. Remember, with St. Augustine grass, as we talked about in our 164 class, St. Augustine grass will develop St. Augustine decline, or SAD, capital S, capital A, capital D, SAD. And once it develops the St. Augustine decline, the only way to really get rid of it is to get rid of the St. Augustine grass and go back with something else, or go back with new St. Augustine sod. You just can't get rid of it. But in the triad, you're going to see Bermuda and zoysia. Like I said, Ms. Swarthout has zoysia at her home. We have several clients that have Bermuda, and then we have a few that have zoysia. But primarily here, our biggest clients have the tall fescue or fine fescue lawns. Establishment and renovation, you can establish a new lawn either with seed or you can do it vegetatively. And when we're speaking of vegetatively, we can either do it with sod, sprigs, or plugs. Here you can see the gentleman putting down sod, and sod will either come in these rolls here, or they'll actually come down in actually square yards that you just actually take the piece and put it. You don't have to unroll it. I've put it out both ways. I prefer doing the slabs, the actual square yard. It's just a little bit easier to handle than these rolls. These rolls can get heavy, and especially if you've got to walk any distance from the pallet that they're on and tote them, it can get very tiresome. Sprigs, you go and actually get the actual plant parts. You spread it over the area to receive the grass, and then you'll have to do some top dressing with sand. Plugs, you're actually taking a core plug out and you're actually sticking in new plugs of seed, and you'll see it on the next slide, or a slide down a little bit further, but actually sticking in the plugs into the turf. And it works really well with your warm season grasses because they're going to be actively growing during the warmer parts of the year, and they're spreading through rhizomes and stolons. You can't do plugs with your fescue type grasses because remember, it's a bunch type grass and that it doesn't spread through the rhizomes or stolons. Here, like I said, you can see the plugs. We're actually putting in the plugs into the soil, and these, looks like Bermuda grass here, will eventually spread and take over. And probably in the course of one summer, this will fill in very nicely and give the client the yard that they're needing. So we're going to talk about new turf installation, and for your landscape management plan, guys, you may want to do a soil test. I'm not going to require it, but you would need to note to your client that a soil test will be performed. And as we've talked in the day class, that we actually do our soil test in January. We always did them in January. We get the results really quick by taking it to John Deere Landscapes. Turnaround time 7 to 10 business days. Usually a lot sooner than that. So I've got soil test in hand. I'm able to go ahead and put out lime in January as well. So I've done 2 site visits in the month of January, and that may carry over into February depending on how many clients you have. And then I'm looking at mid to late February coming back and doing a pre-emergent crabgrass control. So, good information there, guys, for you in your landscape management plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming weeks, and I'm actually going to help you guys kind of develop a fertility program for your landscape management plan. But remember, there's 2 site visits that you can do in January: soil test, application of lime, and then go back in February with the pre-emergent crabgrass control. But for your new turf installation, we'll do our soil test. We'll get rid of any unnecessary weeds. So we'll take care of our weed control. Then we will go back and do some rough grading if we need to get water away from the house, or make sure that no water's getting into the foundation or anything like that. We take care of that. We can come back and add our soil amendments. If it's on a new construction site, the builder may have removed the topsoil and stockpiled it, and we may be able to put the topsoil back out. We'd at this point go ahead and install our drainage. We can pipe out downspouts. We can install irrigation systems before we come back and do our final grade. Once we achieve our final grade, we can do the seeding, we can do the sprigs, we can do the plugs, or we can do the sod. Now the book did mention about seeding the lawn as being the least expensive. It is. It costs less to seed a yard than it does applying sod or doing the sprigs or the plugs. But he also mentioned that it's more that it's the slowest and most labor intensive. I have to disagree with the author on the book about this, In my personal experience, I can seed a yard a whole lot quicker than I can put out sod or that I can do sprigs or plug. I can be in and out doing a seeding job, especially with the equipment today. We used a skid steer with a rock rake attachment, which really cleaned the soil, created a little seed bed for it, and then go back with a straw blower to put out our mulch, which is what we're talking about here. And we'd want to put out a bale per 1,000 square feet for our wheat straw. And then we'd want to make sure that we did have the irrigation turn on to come on. And newly seeded and even newly sodded yards would want to get water every day. Seed, you would water every day, not applying so much water. Sod, you'd give a little bit more water to. And then as the grass started to, come up from the seed, we would cut back our frequency and increase our duration. Same thing with the sod. Once it starts getting attached to the soil, that means the roots should take hold and they're actually attaching itself to the new soil. We could cut back our water and just water every other day or so, and just to increase the duration. And then mowing, I would still wait, a few weeks before I mowed any newly sodded or seeded lawn. Renovation, one of my favorite things to do and one of the most profitable money makers you'll see in your landscape business. And renovation is the overseeding or conversion of existing turf is referred to as renovation. And this is, guys, what we're talking about, plugging and seeding during the fall. And here we see an aerator made by First Products. And what I've done is I've put a YouTube link on Blackboard so you guys can see this machine in action. And what this machine does is actually, it just creates the most perfect seed bed for renovation. And what it is, these gray tines here on the back of the tractor, you see it's hooked up to a PTO on a lawn tractor. And those tines, you drop it to the turf, and then you hit the PTO, and those things just rock back and forth, and they create such a perfect seed bed. And what it does is it does not tear up the turf underneath it. It allows for the perfect aerification of nutrients and air and water to get down to those soil roots. Here, we're talking about overseeding, and this is if you have a warm season grass, such as Bermuda. I wouldn't do this to zoysia. I would only do it personally if I had a Bermuda lawn. But I would come back and I would overseed it with a perennial ryegrass, in the book stating that you would use it at about 5 to 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet. These are just two products that I'm used to seeing. Scott's, it's a big grass seed name, and then Lesco, sold by John Deere Landscapes and the Home Depot. So, when developing a turfgrass nitrogen fertility program, and we're going to talk more about that. We got a chapter on fertilizing the landscape and stuff coming up. But we're going to develop between 5 and 7 visits for our landscape management plan for our turfgrass. So, we've got 1 soil test, so that's 1. We've got a lime application, that's 2. I'm going to go back in February with a pre-emergence. Then I'm going to go back probably 45 to 60 days later, which would put me into early April to early May, just depending on how many yards I have, with another pre-emergence. So that's 4 visits. Then I'm going to do a low nitrogen application during the summer, and then I'm probably going to be spraying weeds a couple of those times. So I'm still at around 5 visits, and then I'm going to go do my plugging and seeding. That's my 6th visit, and then I'm going to come back with like 24-5-11, either late November, early December. Then I'm going to put out the 24-5-11 grass seed, fertilizer, put out the fertilizer. So I'm looking at about 7 visits total for my personal lawn care program that I've put together. And we're going to talk more about that because that's what you're going to do within your landscape management plan. Now, we've picked a property for our landscape management plan that we're doing, but what this could be for our turf program, this could be for any cool season grass that you may pick up as a client. You can have that generic lawn care program that you're incorporating into everybody's landscape management plan. So That's when we're talking about the timing, when to do it. But the first thing we need to know about the timing is whether we have a cool or a warm season grass. And misidentification, or not properly identifying the turf grass, could really be damaging, because we may be fertilizing at the wrong time of year. We want to fertilize or develop our nitrogen programs to be when these grasses are actively growing. So for cool season, we want to give it nitrogen in the spring and then a little bit in the fall. And then warm season, we want to do late spring through the summer and before the fall starts. So different timing for our nitrogen. And then rates, we've talked more about rates in our HOR 164 class, our pesticide management class. So most of you guys are familiar with the pesticide calculations. And we talk a little bit more about calibrations and things in chapter 13. Mowing. All right. The bread and butter of most landscape, full service landscape management. And to start off with, before we start talking about rotary, I want to talk about the mower that you see the young lady here on. This is a Walker GHS. Walker is the manufacturer. So people, when they hear Walker, I've only met one other student that actually knew what I was talking about when I said Walker. Most people think about the walk behind, where you actually have to, use both hands with handles, and you actually walk. No, Walker Manufacturing produces the Walker mower, and it's the Walker GHS, the grass handling system. It is a rotary type mower, so there's two blades down here that are spinning, actually three, yeah. Held on by shear bolts and everything. That can be a nightmare to change. I love this machine to death, don't get me wrong, but it can be kind of hard, maintenance wise, doing some of the repairs. And that all depends on the operator. And we've had some really rough characters operating our machines. My father actually bought the first Walker mower in North Carolina. He was offered the dealership shortly after having the John Deere dealership. And, my dad's always been the type of guy that wants to be in the field, so it was kind of tough for him selling lawnmowers. He wanted to be operating them. So he bought the first Walker mower in North Carolina, turned down the dealership, and ended up, I think we ran 6 at one time. Had the original gas one, then bought the one of the first diesel models that came out, and then ended up getting 4 brand new diesels that we ran continuously. We ran them all the time. We actually had a trailer, and I'll have to take a picture of the trailer, but it carried 2 walkers in the front, and it actually had a self-containment system with a walking floor. We were able to put the grass into a hopper that sat on the ground, and the hopper raised up and dumped in the back of the trailer and kept it enclosed, and we would take back to the farm and we would feed it to our cattle. We always kept 10 to 15 Black Angus cattle, and we would take the grass clippings back every day and feed that to the cows. So just my little story on Walker mowers, but it is a rotary type, and we're going to look at some more rotary type. I love this machine right here. I have one personally. It is a good machine. That, combined with the Walker, ladies and gentlemen, will get a ton of grass mowed each day. It's a stand-up. You stand up on the back with a little platform, and basically it's your walk behind that you're just standing on. This actually helps alleviate the wear and tear on the legs. I mean, running a walk behind all day, you're going to get wore out. But I'm a big Skag fan. Skag and Walker are my 2 favorite brands of lawnmowers. Here's a Honda push mower. We keep one of these on the truck. We also have one here in the program that we're going to be using in some of the classes. But these are all types of rotary mowers, meaning that the the blades are on the bottom turning. Here we have reel mowers, specifically used for warm season grasses. I've ran one of these many a days. I used to take care of a croquet court. I had to mow it 3 times a week. Mowed it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we were always top dressing it and taking care of it. So this box would always get heavy, and because of the sand, and then the machine would start scalping. So I'd have to empty this thing, probably cutting that croquet court, probably sometimes between 20 and 30 times just to mow it so it wouldn't scalp. And here we see the reel mowers on a front mount John Deere, which is used primarily on golf courses. Now, I do know guys down in Texas that actually use these to mow their residential lawns because they do have the warm season grasses. Here we have a flail or vertical mower. Here it's on a swinging arm run off the PTO, and then they do have the rear mount PTOs, but used primarily for highway mowing. All this is kind of self-contained. Not too many rocks or debris is going to be thrown out from underneath this, so it's very safe to use along the highways. Here, a sickle bar mower, again hooked up to a PTO of a tractor. The sickle bar just kind of lays down, and it's used to cut, small brush, hay fields, stuff like that. We use one around the farm every now and then. Mulching, as the Honda mower that I said we keep on the truck and the one we have here at the program, you can put a deflector behind this this door right here, and that deflector will send that grass back around to go through the blades a couple more times, and it just keeps chewing those fine blades up. You can also put, like on your rotary mowers that we just looked at, the Skags and stuff, you can put what they call a gator blade, which has like the fins on the end and the split, almost kind of split, and these are little fins on the edges, and that'll actually recirculate that grass underneath the deck and be cut more. And a zero turn, again, the Turf Tiger by Skag. This is what I mow personally my yard with. I mow it with a 61-inch cut Turf Tiger just because I have so much grass to cut. But this is the Speed Demon. This will get some grass cut really, really quick. It's not a lawnmower that I would put in some of my smaller yards. It would have to be, your larger lot customers that you would put it in. But this thing will absolutely fly. I love it. The maintenance is easy on it. Raising the deck height, again, I mow my yard at 4 inches, and it's easy for us to take on a different job site that would be mowing at a different height. You can change it right there with the bar through these little pins. Easy to change the oil, easy to get to the tires to keep them inflated. Just a good machine overall. Slopes, here is a Ventrac. My father actually bought one of this, and I told the day class this earlier this morning. So this is the third time I've done this lecture today. But with this Ventrac, it used to be Steiner. Steiner made it, and then Ventrac bought it out. And the only difference really is Steiner was all red. Here it's a two-tone gray and red, so that's one way they changed it. But it has 8 tires, 1, 2. In the front, there's 3, 4 in the front, so 4 in the front, 4 in the back. So this lawnmower has 8 wheels and tires, which makes it perfect for mowing slopes. And there's all kinds of attachments that can get here. And I remember when my dad first bought this one. I was a senior in high school, just graduated, and went to Senior Beach Week at Myrtle Beach, as most of us did here in this area. My brother went with us. He was younger, but it was me and my brother and several of our friends that worked with our parents that did most of the grass cutting. We'd go with a crew leader. He'd take 2 or 3 of us, and we'd knock out some turf. Well, we were out that week. We stayed all week. Well, Mom and Dad snuck down to Myrtle Beach to check on us, and then they stopped by Mullins Tractor Company in Mullins, South Carolina, just near Bennettsville, to purchase the Steiner tractor. Well, he bought the mowing deck, and he bought the blower, and he bought the edger that goes on the front of this. And I was talking to them one day at the beach, and they're like, yeah, we would not have gotten the large 80-acre site done if we hadn't stopped and purchased that mower. He was able to do all the blowing and all the edging by setting on the tractor instead of actually, running a backpack blower and a weed eater. So that's my little humor when it comes to that. But I have a lot of loyalty to this machine. It's done a great work. We had a tiller that we put on the front. It could do all kinds of things. But mainly, the best thing about it was mowing these slopes. We didn't have to use a walk behind. We didn't have to walk it. We could ride it. Now we're looking at a hovering lawnmower. I've never ran one of these. I don't think I want to. Here, we have a golf course operator kind of doing a bank. And what that is that that mower's just kind of floating on top of the grass while it's cutting it. I don't know. I'm just not experienced enough to really make any comments on that. All right, mowing height. Well, I know that our book says that tall fescue in the spring needs to be around 2 to 2.5 inches, summer 2.5 to 3, and then fall 2 to 2.5. I mow mine taller. I mow mine at 4 inches. The shortest I've ever cut my lawn is 3.5 inches. So we're looking at tall fescue. We're saying 2 to 4, so I'm in my range. Optimal 2.5, and I'm going an inch higher to 3.5. And then I do cut it. Some days I'll cut it. Some weeks I'll cut it every week, and sometimes, just depending on drill weekend and stuff, that I may go 2 weeks. But I'm okay in that. I like mowing it at 4 inches. For one, I'm shading out the Bermuda grass. I have a big problem with Bermuda popping up. I can shade out the Bermuda grass by letting my fescue get a little bit taller. I'm shading out weeds. I'm not letting sunlight get down to the soil to help germinate those summer weeds. So I'm just a fan of mowing it a little bit taller. Here's some other grasses. We see the common Bermuda. Even here, we'd lower it to probably 3. I wouldn't mow it at 1 inch. I mean, if I'm going to start mowing it at 1 inch, I'm going to get a real mower. But we can convince our clients to keep it, 3 or a little bit under. And yeah, I could see mowing Bermuda every 3 to 7 days. But if it's a residential lawn, we're still going to do it once a week. But remember, I took care of that Bermuda on the croquet court, and I was mowing it 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Sometimes I would skip Fridays and go and mow it on Saturday morning, just depending on if they had a game that Saturday afternoon. They liked it freshly cut in. Bluegrass, I'd still like seeing a little taller. But, we're going to go with these recommendations on this chart versus what's in the book. Mowing frequency, remember, do not remove more than 1/3 of the total leaf surface at any one mowing. So if you let your grass get 5 inches tall, don't mow it down to 2 inches or 2.5 inches. You want to you only want to cut the top third of it. Typically, within our landscape management plans, we're going to mow 32 to 36 times a year. If you're mowing 36, you're kind of including that with some leaf removal, but definitely you're going to mow each property 32 times. You're usually going to do it once a week. During the spring, you may mow it twice a week, especially if you put out some nitrogen fertilizer and it's kicked in. You'll want to get it. And if we have a lot of rain, I mean, there's times that you go back. If you're mowing a client's lawn on Wednesday, you go back the next Wednesday. It just takes forever. So it might be better to go back and cut it on Saturday, or do it every 4 days, skipping Sundays, especially during the spring, because it's just a lot easier on you and a lot easier on the machine. And during the hot weather in the summer, we may skip some mowings just because we haven't had any rain, and that the turf grass itself is very stressed out during the heat. Now, mowing pattern. This is what can make you or break you. This is what will actually get you a lot of jobs. People see you striping up the neighbor's yard, they're going to want their yard to look like this. And what we're meaning right here is squared off. Let's say we've got the perfect postage lot stamp. We're going to go ahead and mow the outside edge. Well, one reason we want to do that is so your weed eater guy can go ahead and start trimming. He's not having to wait for you to cut around the tree rings or the pavement's the biggest thing. So you go down one side of the driveway, come across the front of the house, come up the other side of the driveway for the neighbor's house, and then go across the front sidewalk. That allows the trimmer guy to go ahead and start trimming. By the time you finish mowing, he's probably got everything trimmed and blowed off, and you're moving to the next yard. Well, that's what we term squared off. Grain. When we keep mowing in the same direction, as we can see here, hopefully you can see the mouse, but you're always going to mow in the direction of the lightest stripe. So we can see here we have a light green stripe, dark green, light green, dark, light green. So to keep and maintain these stripes, you're going to go through the light. You're always going to drive towards the light. So I'm driving down this light path. Well, guess what? When I get over, when I get over and I start coming this way, that side looks light. It's reversed. I'm looking at it from here. If I walk down and turn around and look back this way, the stripes are going to be reversed. They're going to look opposite. So this would be the dark one coming back this way, and then going this way would be your dark ones. And that's what we refer to as the grain. The actual grass starts growing in that pattern. It starts growing kind of horizontally in that pattern. And some guys will double cut it. They'll go down this way and come back the same path to get rid of that. But then you're not having the striping. I love the striping look. And then some people do the hockey rink look, and I'm probably one of the biggest hockey fans in the area. But I don't want my yard mowed like a hockey rink. That's when you mow in a circle and you keep blowing all the stuff inside, or either you can blow it outside. But I don't like that round look. I want the baseball diamond effect in my yard. I'm just making sure I'm telling you everything that I want you to know from the chapter. You see a lot of older retired people that mow their yard in this hockey rink style. They're also the ones that are scalping their fescue lawns down to nothing. So it just, it's a pet peeve of mine. I love the stripes, and I will always do that. And once you learn how to do it, you'll always do it, and nothing ticks me off more than I've striped my lawn and I'm working for a customer and I've got these stripes. Now, granted, I wouldn't do it every time like this. I may mow this pattern direction 3 or 4 times. Then I'm going to start checkerboarding it, which means I'm going to go across, back, cross, back. That gives you the checkerboard effect. Or I could cut diagonally. Go diagonally back, diagonally back, diagonally back. Do that for 3 or 4 weeks. Then cut it diagonal this way, back, diagonally up, diagonally back. That gives you that diamond effect on the lawn, and that helps reduce the grain as well by changing it up every 3 or 4 weeks. You do it 3 or 4 weeks to get that pattern set, then start mowing it diagonally or checkerboard to keep it. And here is just a little easier demonstration. We're going to start right here, and we're going to cut. We're going to square off the property. That way, our guys can go ahead and start weed eating and trimming the sidewalks. Then, going around, and then bingo, he starts doing the pattern as we see over here. Up, going in the lightest direction. He turns around, so coming back this way is the lighter direction. And we're facing north here. It is the lighter direction. Coming back south, the guy riding the mower sees it light, but you see it dark because you're standing in the opposite direction, and it gives you this striping pattern. Here's how we would do it if we were checkerboarding it. Gentleman starts here. He squares off the property, comes over here, cuts across, goes down, comes up, goes down, goes up, comes back. And when he gets all the way over here, this is when you can start going this way, back, up, back. So he's got that diamond effect. And this is what you'd call the diamond pattern. All right, clipping removal. To bag or not to bag. This is always going to be a big debatable question. Does leaving clippings cause thatch? Probably not. Does bagging remove nutrients? Probably so. There's good points and bad points to each. Well, I see a good point of bagging, of removing debris and leaf. Combining this with leaf removal, I mean, we've knocked out, we've killed 2 birds with 1 stone using the Walker GHS. We're able to get up the leaves and mow the lawn at the same time. Well, if I didn't bag, and this can be prevented too with training. Here we have an individual that mowed and they side discharged towards the car. They didn't square off the property and blow the first couple rings of grass inward so we don't have this problem. Now we're going to have to deal with this poor woman who's mad that grass clippings are on her car, and she's going to have to get somebody to wash it. And it's going to be us paying for it. We're going to have to pay the bill for that or take it. But what's worse is some of these people would want you to repaint their car. And we've gotten just a little bit of grass on a car before, and they've had a cracked windshield. And because they get a little bit of grass back here, the judge is going to tell you to fix their windshield because there's no proof that you didn't do it, even though they've been riding around 6 months with a cracked windshield. People will do it, and it ticks me off. So you've got to have good insurance and let these guys help you with this, because there's always people looking for an easy way out. But training your employees to mow the grass inward, I mean, look, it's going to take longer to clean this mess up than it did to mow it, and they still ain't even come by with the weed eater or edger to cut that. So you still got to deal with that mess. And then you're going to have to deal with the individual that's going to come out and see their car like this, and they're either going to cuss you out or they're going to be understanding and just say, hey, get my car clean. So there's good points and bad points to both. As you can probably tell, though, I'm a friend of bagging the turf grass. All right, trimming, edging, and blowing. Here we have a guy using a stick edger, which here's a picture of a stick edger. It's a little metal blade that needs to be replaced. We would run through probably 3 or 4 of these a day. Our guys having to change out because we're doing so many sidewalks and doing the curbs. And as you can see, he's doing it here. He's creating such a deep trench there, though. You don't need that. I could take a stick edger and stick edge everything the first go around, the first mowing, and I wouldn't have to use a stick edger the rest of the summer. Stick edger is what you put people that you first hire. They're not good enough to run a string trimmer, and they don't know much about the mowing equipment. Put them on a stick edger, and I mean it's dummy proof. But what you can do is create that brown trench. So you see concrete, brown dirt, green grass. You don't want that brown trench there. And if you let me do it, you won't have the problem. Guys, I don't mean to brag, but I have probably in my lifetime put more miles on my feet with a string trimmer than probably anybody else in the world. I mean, I started doing it by the time I was 7 or 8 years old, working for my parents every day during the summer and every day when I got out of school. Mom would pick us up at school, me and my brother, take me and my brother to a job site, and we'd work with my dad and his crew. I ran the string trimmer, and my brother would run either the walker or push mower. So I've got many, many miles with the string trimmer, and this is what this gentleman right here has, is the string trimmer. And like I said, it's probably something I shouldn't brag on, but if there was a weed eater wars like there is cupcake wars, I would definitely win it, hands down. I would go up against anybody and create that perfect line. I mean, it would be perfect. I've done it. I can do it blindfolded. And again, it's not something I should brag about, but I know how to do it. It was just something that my dad started teaching me early. I'd followed one of his crew. I followed one of his crew leaders named Dan that actually kind of showed me how to run the weed eater, and I took off from it. And as you can see here, this is the first weed eater that my dad actually bought me. It was a bent shaft because I was too little to hold the straight edge. I would never use one of these right now, but I had to when I was a little fella because I was just I couldn't hold up the straight ones. Now with irrigation, frequent shallow irrigation does cause the shallow roots, and what this can do is encourage disease, encourages weeds, increases thatch, and it increases compaction. So the only time that we want to frequently water shallow is when we've just seeded the yard. We want that new seed to be watered every day, which is frequently, and we want it to be shallow watering because it's giving that seed time to germinate. And once the grass comes up 7 to 10 days later, we're going to decrease our frequency and increase our duration. And hopefully by the end of when the grass is perfectly established, we'd only be watering 2 to 3 times a week. With a pop-up like this, we would run our average of about 6 minutes. With the rotors, the ones that and then go back and then we're going to be doing them for about 20 minutes. And you would never put your pop-ups on the same zone as you would a rotor. All right, aeration. Well, remember I showed you that picture, first products, the aerator. Here we have shallow roots and compacted soil. When we're coming in, breaking those holes up, either removing the core or doing it with the aerator and not removing the core, we're allowing air and water and nutrients to get down to the roots. This creates new growth and creates deeper roots that's going to give us the healthier turf that our clients long so desire. And what we desire as lawn care professionals. Well, look at this. Look at these deep roots, all created by getting air, water, and nutrients down to the root zone. Here we have a walk-behind plugger. We're actually taking the actual core plug out of the soil, and we can see some thatch right here with that plug. And when you do your lab, you're actually going to see if you have thatch. And this is one good way to see that if you do have thatch, is that little bit of inorganic, organic material right there in between the soil surface and the vegetation layer. But here you can see we're leaving the plugs. I recommend leaving the plugs. They're full of nutrients. They're going to break down quickly, especially because we're doing it in the fall. We're going to start getting rain. Mr. Jack Frost is going to visit us. So, I mean, all this adds up to a quick breakdown of the plugs. I've only had one client one time request that we rake up the plugs. We did it just to make her happy. You know, of course, we charged extra, but we couldn't sell her on the point that we were raking up the nutrients. She didn't like looking at the little, she thought it looked like dog droppings. Again, aeration, this is first products. I'm putting a link in the links folder on Blackboard of first products, and you'll actually see this machine work in action. Again, it's hooked up to a PTO. Here it has a roller. You have an option of putting a seeder on the back. We didn't even have the roller on the back. We just did the actual tines. And guys, with this machine can actually break up concrete or asphalt. So you know, you got to be careful not to drop it down on the pavement when you're unloading it off the trailer or truck. Thatch is an intermingled layer of living and dead roots and stems between the green vegetation and the soil surface. So right there's the top of your soil surface, and then you've got the vegetation. So we've got about an inch and a half of thatch a part of this soil. And here's a better picture of it. We actually got an inch and a half. We've got our soil line right here, and then we've got our crown and our grass, and then the grass blade. So we've got an inch and a half of thatch that's built up right here. So we definitely need some aerification or aeration for this lawn. Another good picture, we have the size of a quarter. The thatch representing the size of a quarter, you know, about an inch, a little larger. And then we have some mat, and then we actually have our soil here. So this thatch is very detrimental to the lawn. And there's basically only one way to get rid of that, and that's using the vertical mower or dethatcher. We have one here that we run in HOR 118 to let you guys get a feel for it. You'd want to do this, you know, prior to plugging and seeding. So, excuse me. You'd want to, you know, do this first and then come back with your aerator or your core plugger and do your plugging and seeding. But what this does is remove that thatch layer. You do have to rake this up onto a tarp, or if you had the Walker GHS mower, you could actually kick it around and actually vacuum up this thatch material. Pest management. You know, we're always looking for disease control. You know, we're going to be criticized as lawn care professionals that we create our own disease. You know, high nitrogen and moist climate creates brown patch. You know, you're probably going to get accused of that a time or two in your career. But we're always going to be looking for disease control, insect control, and weed control. And weed control is probably going to be our biggest moneymaker because there's more weeds than any of it. Insects, we're going to take care of probably white grubs, chinch bugs, things like that. But you know that is probably probably one of your clients' least problems. They're gonna, you know, my concern, they definitely want to get rid of their grubs, but they don't want the brown patch in their lawn, and they definitely don't want the weeds. And here we have the IPM model. I mean, we've got to monitor. We got to monitor for these pests. We're going to prevent and use cultural practices that prevent it. If we see the pest, we're going to control it only when it reaches the threshold that we have set or that our clients have set. We may have some clients that weeds in the yard doesn't bother them. They're perfectly fine with it. They just want it mowed, maybe spray it once, twice a year for clover, but the other weeds, you know, they're fine with it. So they've set their threshold. Threshold for insect control might be, you know, when does the cost of treatment exceed the cost of replacement? So it may cost more to get rid of the insect than it is just to reseed the lawn. So only you or the client can set that threshold. And it's different, you know, if we're growing crops, if we're a sod farmer, we're definitely going to have to spend the money, and our threshold is going to be a lot less lower than if we're a residential client. Residential client may not care. They're like, all right, just plug it and seed it in the fall again. Let the disease or the insect get it, or just spray the weeds out before you do it. We're not that big. But if you're a sod farmer or selling plugs and sprigs, you're going to have a very low threshold, and you're going to be doing more things preventatively, adding preventative disease control versus waiting till it happens. You're going to take care of it and be proactive on it. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about turfgrass plant growth regulators. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 prevents the seed head formation, whereas the type 2 will actually control the growth of the plant. And I was first introduced to this by a guy named Ed that worked for my parents several years ago, and he left and went and worked for a golf course, and then he came back to us and worked for a few more years. And what he said they did on the golf course is they would apply nitrogen to the greens, and then they'd come back and spray plant growth regulators on it. What that was doing is creating a thicker, greener greens and tee boxes, and they didn't have to mow it quite as much. So I thought that was pretty neat. And we started incorporating turfgrass plant growth regulators on like long sidewalks or banks that we had to weed eat. Even the Steiner or the Ventrac tractor was too steep for. We actually had to get up there with weed eaters. We would weed eat it down, and then we would spray it with the turfgrass regulator, growth regulator, and we wouldn't have to weed eat it again for several weeks or even a month or so down the road, and then we'd have to come back and touch it up. But that worked good for places where you've got miles and miles of sidewalks or miles and miles of shrub beds. You can actually do that and kind of eliminate some of the man hours necessary to trim it. And again, this is the end of this presentation. The grass is always greener in my backyard. And guys, that's why we need to look at grass. The grass can always be greener on your side, and your pocketbook can be a lot greener when you incorporate turfgrass management into your landscape business. I do have the lab up for you guys, Turfgrass Management Lab. I have the links on Blackboard to take a look at the first products, and then I'm probably going to add up a couple more YouTubes from the Lawn Care Millionaire. Thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture.